So yeah, my day-to-day working with Python is building web apps. This is not related to that. This is something that I've done on the side. As we mentioned, I'm involved in PyLadies, and one of the things that we would like to do as part of PyLadies is set up a distance intro to Python so that people don't have to take quite as much of a disruption to their schedule to come out for an extended intro to Python. So the reason, let's see, I can get, there we go. So the reason that I wanted to approach this topic was because the process of setting up Python and an editor on a room full of different computers with different operating systems can be a headache. So this gives us something where we can give a unified environment, and I'll explain how that works. So before you can understand what JupyterHub is, you need to understand what a Jupyter Notebook is. I think most people in this room are familiar with that, but just in case, I'm going to run through it. So it is something that lets you run Python code as well as some other languages, R, Julia, that sort of thing, in your browser. And here they have a little website where you can just play with it. So I'm just going to open up one of their samples just so you can see. This is just an example Jupyter Notebook. So you can see you can put text blocks where you just have instructions or write notes. And then you can have code blocks where if I hit, let's see.
Shifted.
Yeah, I think it doesn't. Oh, okay. Oh, it's thinking. Yep, this little star here means it's thinking. I just wasn't waiting long enough. And it'll run that chunk of code. And then you can tweak it, go back and run it again, that sort of thing. So this is something where you can, in your browser, sit here and tinker with code. So this is a good option. There it goes. So this is a good option for something where I can present people with a unified environment. Okay, so that is what Jupyter Notebook is. Come on, cooperate. There we go. All right, so that's what Jupyter Notebook is. So JupyterHub is going to take that, and we've still got that browser piece. Your users are still accessing it through the browser, but you've got a server that has a database, can spawn these notebooks. It has an authenticator, so it can take credentials. So it does all of this work of creating a back end where people can log in and have access to the Jupyter Notebooks that you've already got prepared, have access to the Python installation that you have on the server, and run things in an environment that you know all the variables of the environment their code is running in. So why use it for this purpose? Well, like I said, distance learning amplifies all the things that are already a headache with doing an intro class in particular, but really doing any sort of Python class or any sort of coding class. People are going to come with different installations. They'll have different libraries installed, different versions. And so JupyterHub allows you to eliminate all three of these variables: installation, version, and dependencies. Your students need a browser, and that's it. The version of the Python that they're using is defined by the server. The dependencies are installed on the server, and so all of that is unified and under your control, and you have a lot less variables. You can get started much faster. All right, so the setup. I'm going to actually do this live. I've got some of this prepared because some of the steps take a while, so the stuff that takes a while is done ahead of time, and we're not going to get completely done, but we're going to get to something that we can log into. All right, so I started with a Digital Ocean Ubuntu 16.04 server already set up with a non-root user that has sudo privileges. That's essentially all the setup I did. If you look down here at the bottom, this also install Anaconda. I provided a link to instructions on how you can install Anaconda on said Ubuntu 16.04 server. And I pre-did that because that can take a while. Now I'm going to jump over and do each of these steps. So what we're going to do here, we're just going to install some packages. We're going to make sure we've got the development Python. Python 3, we need pip, we need npm, Node Package Manager. And then we're just going to install the stuff that we're going to need to do JupyterHub. So I am going to Alt-Tab over here. Whoops. There we go. All right, so I need to do, oops, oh, I'm not, I need to SSH in. So I made it TriPython at a vanity domain that I have. All right, and it is important that you set up DNS. I'm gonna go ahead and actually hop over here where I've got this note. This is a good time to set up DNS because you want this to have gotten through the servers to be registered before you get to a later step. We'll get to that. All right, so back to this. All right, now that I'm in the actual server, I can do my sudo apt-get install Python 3 dev, Python 3 pip, and npm. Yes. All right, so that's going to take just a minute, but it won't take too long, not as long as installing Anaconda. So I'm going to go ahead and give you a little bit. So I just mentioned setting up DNS. The teacher in me can't resist asking, who can guess why I might have wanted to go ahead and set up DNS?
To replicate it through the DNS servers.
Well, that's what I need to happen, but why do I need that to happen?
You're going to use letsencrypt or something like that?
Bingo. Yes, I'm going to use letsencrypt. So in order to set up letsencrypt, it has to be able to go to the domain name that I'm giving it and confirm that it can access it that way. So I need it to have already gone through before that happens. Now I set it up yesterday, so there's no worries about that. But I put that note in here because these slides are going to go up out on the TriPython mailing list that Chris just mentioned. You wouldn't get it through Meetup, but you'll get it through the TriPython mailing list. These slides will go up. Ooh, what are we failing to fetch? I think I need to update. Let's try that.
So where is the server that you're connected to?
This is in New York City.
Okay.
You can see here New York City 2 mirrors. This is using DigitalOcean's New York City location. I think it's actually New York City 3 is where my server is. All right, so let's try those installs again. Yes. Okay, better. But anyway, so JupyterHub uses SSL. JupyterHub uses SSL primarily. You can get around it, but you have to really know what you're doing. You have to really tell it, yes, I'm absolutely sure I don't want to. Because since it's dealing with authentication, it's dealing with the transmission of passwords, you absolutely need to have encryption going on, or else you're going to be making people's passwords vulnerable. So JupyterHub really makes it difficult if you want to not use SSL. And they say if you're going to not use SSL with JupyterHub, that should be because you've got SSL on a different layer. That you've got another, Nginx or something that is handling the incoming traffic, and then you cannot use SSL internally if you've got a setup like that. In this case, we're just using JupyterHub as the server itself, so we are perfectly fine with using SSL. All right, there we go. Okay, so now I'm going to do Python 3-m pip install JupyterHub. Oops. All right, and then sudo npm install -g. All right, and this is just a proxy that JupyterHub is using to be able to accomplish that. Oh, right, that's.
Will it also install an HTTPS as well as the?
Yes.
Okay.
What is my error here?
Configure instead of you.
Yeah. You're spelling the configure.
Oh, that would help. There we go. Configure my configurable. All right, much better. Okay. And then last up, we need to just make a symlink. Hopefully I can do this correctly. And this is just making sure that we can access Node.js from the correct place.
7:30.
All right. So now we've got those steps taken care of. So I'm going to hop back over here. So we've got this initial server set up is done. All right. So then, now we need to do our setup on JupyterHub itself. So I am using a method for setting up JupyterHub that's a lot faster than doing it completely manually. This is using a shortcut graciously put up by Min Ragan Kelley, who works on the JupyterHub project itself. He, as you can tell from the link, did a talk on this in one of the 2016 PyData conferences. And so I'm using his repo, and just in case, so that this presentation has a little bit better chance of longevity, I went ahead and forked it. So the second link is on my GitHub. It's exactly the same thing. So now I'm going to make a directory for it, move into that, change the ownership of the directory, clone the repo, and then this conda inf create, this is using part of that repo. We're using conda. Remember I said that I pre-installed Anaconda because it takes a while to install, but we're using the magic of conda to be able to go ahead and create this whole environment. He's already set up a lot of stuff exactly the way you're going to want it to run, so we're taking advantage of that to do this, and then we're just going to activate that virtual environment. So I'm going to go ahead and pop over here. And okay, so and this could actually be any directory. This is just what I chose. I think it's what Min Ragan Kelley used in his talk also, but doesn't matter that much. All right, so sudo, we're gonna own it. And then we're gonna clone the directory.
So why are we cloning?
Because this directory has the environment that we need to set up and some configuration stuff, that sort of thing. It's giving us a shortcut.
Oh, okay.
Yes, okay. Type that whole thing with no errors. All right. This is the magic that it's giving us, is this. Is that it's got this environment file in it, and we're using conda to extract that, in theory. Oh, because I didn't change into the GitHub directory, that would help. Where the file actually exists. There we go. So now Anaconda is extracting all of this and creating our environment that we need to be able to run JupyterHub, setting up all our dependencies and everything exactly the way we'll need it. Yes?
So earlier you did an apt-get install of Python 3
And now we're using Anaconda. So,
I was pulling the dev tools.
oh, the dev tools.
Yeah, Python 3 itself was already installed, actually, because it's Ubuntu. But it's the dev tools so that I could get pip.
Okay, well, if you have Conda, you generally don't use pip, you use it.
No, but I was trying to... So there are a couple of different ways to do it. There are a couple of different, depending on your Conda version, there's different, it's changed over time. And the pip steps are a little bit more static. So that's why I wanted to use pip where I could. So, I mean, I could have used Conda. You have a very valid point that I could have used Conda. I needed to do the installation step to install NPM regardless. So I just threw it in there. More people are familiar with pip, so.
Okay.
But yeah, I could have used Conda. Would have been a totally valid option.
When you can use pip with kind of Conda.
Well, yeah, yeah.
It's just, you had a different pip other than the one
Yeah.
in Anaconda, so.
So one of the things,
It's only in different.
yeah, one of the things to consider in this is that these are my steps that I put together after I went through and did this, and I went through a whole bunch of different trial and error processes. So there are some things in here that may not have gotten cleaned up. So that may be one of them, where I could clean that up a little and remove a step. But, all right, so now it tells us right here, now that it's finished putting it together, it says, to activate this environment, here's your code. That's exactly what we're gonna do, and I'm just gonna go ahead and handy dandy shortcut this. Less typing is awesome. All right, and then this isn't supposed to, okay, that step isn't supposed to take time. All right, so now we've got our environment set up. So now we've done our setup. We've got it installed, we've got an environment running for it. Oops. There we go. And now we get to the SSL. This is where you set up DNS, right? So this is where we're going to get cloned from Let's Encrypt now. So I'm going to, I'm going to go ahead and walk through this. So we're going to get cloned from Let's Encrypt, change into that directory, and then this is the command from Let's Encrypt that will make all the magic happen. You can go to the Let's Encrypt website if you want to understand this more. I'm kind of skimming over it because this isn't core to what we're doing. This is just setting up the SSL. And then once we've got this set up, we'll be able to create our configuration file for JupyterHub that will give it the SSL key, the SSL certificate, and tell it to use port 443, which is the SSL port. And so we need to do this Let's Encrypt step to make that work. So if I switch back over here, I'm going to switch directories back up, and then I'm going to clone that. Here, I can make that go higher so everybody can see. There we go, that's better. Let's encrypt. All right. Okay, and then I'm going to change into that directory and run our magic command. All right, and this is where it reaches out to Let's Encrypt. It says, hey, I'm at this domain. I want a certificate, and Let's Encrypt goes, all right, let me double check, and it's going to go and ping that web address, make sure it points to the right place, which is why DNS matters, and then it'll get everything. It'll create that key. Yep. I think I might need to do a permission step that I didn't put into the slides. If that's correct, then I'll make sure to amend the slides before I send them out. Because I'm sitting here going, I don't have a permission step here, but I remember changing the permissions on my key so that JupyterHub could see it. But I'm going to try it because maybe I did something different that made that not necessary. We'll see. We'll find out.
Do you want questions while we're waiting?
Yeah, sure, go ahead.
So you mentioned that you needed Node.js. Why is that?
It's what runs the server. The configurable HTTP proxy is a node package. You could use other options, but that's the one that Min Ragan Kelley's setup is configured to use. And I'm taking advantage of his shortcuts, so that was why I used that. But yeah, there probably are pure Python ways that you can do it, but they don't take advantage of these shortcuts. So let's see. Agree to the terms. No. Okay, and this is where it's doing the verification. All right.
The files are out on your server, or are they?
Yeah, they are on the server where I just ran this.
Okay.
They are here. All right, so in fact, if I pop over here, these are where they are stored by default. This is the directory and then just your domain in there. Although actually, I will say one little note is that these are not actually where the files are, this live folder. There's also an archive folder that it stores every cert you've ever had. So like when you renew your cert, it'll put the new cert there, but this is the link that will symlink to whatever the current one is. So just a little behind the scenes about how Let's Encrypt works when you put that on. So this link we can put into the JupyterHub configuration, and this will always point to the active, current, valid cert. Whereas Let's Encrypt behind the scenes, every time I have to renew my certificate, they'll change the actual one, but this will still point to whatever the most current one is. So that is handy. All right, so I'm going to come over here. I'll go ahead and clear again so that everybody can see what I'm doing. And then I'm going to go into, let's see, wait, I'm not in the right folder. There we go. All right. So now I need to do, so this generate config line just gives you a blank configuration file. And when I say blank, you're going to see that that's kind of a figure of speech here in a second. So then I'm going to, let's see. I didn't list the, let's see, it's JupyterHub, yeah, okay. So it's just JupyterHub config.py. And this is what I mean by blank is kind of a lie. It's got tons of settings in here that you can apply just by uncommenting. We're not going to use these. I think they have the settings that we're doing in here somewhere, but rather than search for them, I'm just going to pop them in here at the top. And then let's see. Whoops. And then last one is the port. All right, and then save and exit. All right, and then we have a little magic command. I hate magic commands, but this is one. We just need to allow Node to get to it. And yeah, I'm not a Node.js person, so I don't really understand this. I just know it is the thing that you need to be able to make this next piece work. So, if anybody knows what this is actually doing, I would love to learn it. But I couldn't find anything that really explained it beyond just, oh yeah, you need this to make this work. What is your problem? Slash, oh. Slash bin slash node. There we go. All right. So now we've got that. Now I'm willing to bet that I'm going to have a permissions issue, but let's find out. If I just hit JupyterHub, it should run. Yeah, permissions issue. Okay, so I don't remember what exactly the permissions were that I had to do, so I'm just going to make them all wide open because that way I know it'll work.
It's a little on the edge.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, this is internal. It's not something that's directly accessible, so, you know. All right, so cd, let's see, that was in slash etsy slash let's encrypt, enter. Okay, and then, so it's the live.
Well,
So-
if it's all internal, why did you have to set up the DNS? It's all internal?
Well, this particular thing is internal. Where the keys live is internal.
Okay.
Not the access to the server itself. Just all I'm doing is changing permissions on the keys themselves. That's not something that's... So the JupyterHub will serve those files up, but there's nothing external that is directly accessing these files on my computer. So that's why I'm not entirely concerned about making them wide open. I wouldn't normally do that, but just for expediency. All right, so the live and the archive folder, I'm just going to make everything in them wide open. So let's see. All right, so and then same thing on live. All right, so now if I go back to my JupyterHub folder, now I should be able to run it. All right, JupyterHub is now running at localhost. So now if I switch over here, escape out of this, and open this up, I should be able to go to tripython.flowerandcsu.com. And any of you could too. And so this is my JupyterHub server that I just set up, running live online. Now, at the moment, it's just set up with the local users that are on the server, which is just me. But you can see that I can log in, and let me make this bigger. And so I've got, no, go away. So I could do a new notebook. I can do, Python 3 is the only kernel that I've got available for JupyterHub. You can set up additional languages, additional kernels. But at the moment, all I've got is the original one that JupyterHub itself was set up in. So I can make a new Python 3 notebook. Here's my brand new JupyterHub notebook running on my server. I can create that, I can save it, it'll save on the server and be there for me to come back to if I log back in as the same user later. So that's all lovely, but remember I said it's just the local users, which right now is just me. So that's not very helpful. Yep, Jenny's got it up on her computer. So that's not super helpful at this point. I mean, it's great. We've gotten, the bulk of the way there. The server is running. But then where do we go to now? So the next thing we need to do is authentication. We need to figure out some way that all of these users are going to log in. So there's a few different ways to accomplish this. One way is you can do built-in local users. You can just create users on the server itself and let everybody log in. That is built into JupyterHub, the ability to do that. So if you only are going to need 3 people, or you're going to have a static class that you're going to have for an entire semester that you're going to do different notebooks with and that sort of thing, that might be a good option for you. Just go ahead and manually set up all the users you're going to need and use the regular PAM authentication that's built in. The catch with that is that JupyterHub must have the permissions to spawn sessions as other users. That's a setup piece that we have not done, so it's not quite ready for that. I installed it as me, so it could spawn a session as me. So when I logged in as me, it had the permissions to spawn a session as me. But if you're going to have it spawn sessions as other users, there's a little bit more you have to set up. It's just tweaking the groups that have access to it. Probably most commonly what people are going to use is OAuth. I don't know what happened to my other bullet here, but anyway. But JupyterHub has built-in ability to use OAuth. GitHub, Google, Bitbucket, all kinds of different things. You do have to do a couple more installation steps to make that work, and I'm not going to go through those installation steps because they would involve me showing my GitHub authentication credentials, which are not wise, so I'm not going to go quite that far. But that is actually how I'm planning to set this up for PyLadies and have it set up on the server that I'm using for that, is using GitHub credentials. Just a side note, the reason I picked GitHub for that particular application is that we're looking at people who are getting started in Python, and I wanted to encourage them to go ahead and be getting involved in the community, be putting code out there, that sort of thing. So I figured if this makes them get a GitHub account, fantastic. It's free to make an account. It's no more complicated than making an account anywhere else. So I thought that would be a great way to introduce people to the world of Python. So that's what I was planning to use, was the GitHub OAuth. Another good option is Google, because almost everybody has acquired a Google account at some point, even if they don't use it for much. And so that's something where very few people would have to create an account anywhere to be able to use that. But depending on your application. And then I put custom over here because if you are a brave soul, JupyterHub gives you the ability, and actually has a tutorial for how to create your own custom authentication backends to build into JupyterHub. So if built-in local users isn't going to suit you and OAuth isn't going to suit you, you want something where your users are going to go sign up on your JupyterHub server and create their accounts. JupyterHub actually has some training wheels for you to kind of help you go down that path. It is, of course, as you would expect, by far the most complicated of these options. But you're not completely on your own. They actually support that. So, let's see.
Is it like,
Oh, that was all I had. So that was a whirlwind tour, getting up and running with JupyterHub server. As you can see, I did that all inside of a presentation. So, the only things that I did outside of this, that I did before coming in here, were I set up my DNS, I set up a non-root user with sudo privileges, and I installed Anaconda. And that's it. That's all I did. And those steps entirely put together probably only took me about 15 minutes. So setting up a JupyterHub server is not a major investment if you have the resources available. I love this GitHub repo that Min Ragan Kelley put up, because it makes it so much easier, because there's so many fewer dependencies that you need to worry about. As Chris pointed out, this might even be able to be cleaned up further from the process I've got here. And so I think this is a great tool. JupyterHub is still getting started. They're not even at 1.0 yet. So I'm really excited to see where they go with it and what kinds of things are done with it. So, yes.
Have you also looked at other cloud options? I was wondering if somebody had configured a Docker image with all of this already set up, and all you had to do was just say, here's my Docker image.
Yeah, so it's a little bit large for something like that. It's not uncommon if you have any substantial volume of people using it that you actually need to end up doing load balancing across multiple servers anyway, which makes containerizing it a little trickier. Another thing that I will probably do with the PyLadies version that I haven't actually played with any, so that's why I didn't bring it up, is JupyterHub can configure to spawn its own Docker sessions, so that each person who logs in is operating inside of a Docker session, insulated from anybody else who's doing theirs. And so that gives you some benefits in terms of sandboxing. And yeah, that's harder when you are starting inside of a container. You can do it, but then you've got the resource loading. And so I decided to do the stripped down version just to preserve as much of the computing power for JupyterHub itself, because it's not something that needs to be containerized necessarily. But yes, I think there are containerized versions. I just wanted more flexibility to set it up and tweak it as needed. Mm-hmm.
So in this version, everybody that you set up as user will have visibility of all the files, or will they have their own version of
Yeah, so you can, so once I've got it set up, so when I logged in there, actually I'm still logged in over wrong window. Here we go. So when I logged in, I was able to create a new Jupyter Notebook, and that would be something that they would have the ability to do. But you also can have over here, you notice I've got, this is just my Anaconda installation, and that's just because it installed in my home directory. Anything that is in, when you're doing the local user route, anything that's in their home directory is going to show up here. So you can have pre-made notebooks that show up here. And you can actually see this untitled, that's the one that I just opened over here, that has already saved to the server. So you can have pre-made notebooks here for them, or they can create their own stuff and play with and come back to it later. One thing about the Docker installation, the spawning Docker sessions, is that it'll clear, so everybody can. It doesn't take up as much space, because once somebody is done, it'll clear their Docker session, blow it away, and then save that space for somebody else to come in. And for my particular purpose, I wouldn't be planning for it to be a long-term usage thing, so the Docker session makes sense. Yeah, so you can provide notebooks to work from. If I'm doing an intro to Python, I'm very likely to have a pre-made notebook that they're going to work from, where they'll type in the code, but I'll have text blocks that explain what they're doing, and maybe even have some of the code written out there so that they hopefully don't do too much copy and paste, because you don't learn as well that way, but it's all there so that they can have it right in front of them. They can download that notebook later, because I can store that on GitHub and let them download it from GitHub onto their own computer. So yeah, it gives you a lot of flexibility in terms of how people are going to log in and use it.
If you discover that you need to install Python package during your class, how do you do that?
What do you mean?
Like someone asks a question that you need to install. Another Python package that's not in the Anaconda environment. You need to stop your server?
So, no, you don't need to stop the server. If you install something else, you'll need to refresh this page in order to get it to show up here. But you see I've got Python 3 here. Yeah. If I installed, for instance, Python 2 on the server, then I hit refresh on this page, it'll show Python 2 as being available.
But if you need to install another Python 3 package, I don't know, request, for instance, you don't have before?
And that'll just be available. Yep. I mean, and this does come with a standard library. I mean, obviously your point still applies for third-party libraries, but just to be a little bit nitpicky, request is part of the,
I guess that's,
So,
Yeah.
So in a case where you needed something unusual, which I think
Mhm.
is
Yeah.
something like
Mhm.
Maya or
Yeah.
Arrow or something
Yeah,
like
exactly.
that, right? If I'm a user of your JupyterHub,
mhm.
usually I would need to either pip install or
Mhm.
drop to a shell to do that. How do they do that? from
The
within
users would
JupyterHub?
not be able to do that.
Okay, so you as admin would have to go in and
Yes.
take care of it.
Yes, you have to install it on the server. That is both a benefit and a drawback.
Agreed.
It's one of the reasons I want this for my particular application is because I want control of what dependencies are present and what versions of things are present and that sort of thing. I don't want people going and overriding that.
You go to a terminal session.
You can go into terminal session. Yeah, but I don't think you have the permissions. I guess it depends on how you set it up. If you log in as a user that has sudo privileges, you very well may be able to do that. So I guess it depends on how you set it up. But, yep. Yes.
I might even say, because I was using Jupyter on Digital Ocean. And I used a recipe that meant that I was actually using the repositories from Ubuntu instead of from Anaconda, which meant I got sort of crossed up on importing libraries with pip. Apparently, there were some things that I wanted that were really Conda libraries. If you run into that, or maybe that's something to be sensitive to when
Yeah.
setting the environment up.
No, that's an important point. In my particular situation, for what I've got planned for it right now, I don't really need libraries so much because I'm looking at using it for an intro to Python class. But that is a very good point. If I wanted to do, say a Python for data science, then I would probably need, NumPy, SciPy, Pandas, whatever it is I want to use. And that stuff would need to get installed, and then it would matter how I install it. The important thing is that it is installed for the kernel that you're going to be using here. If it's for the Python 3 installation that's here, if it's installed where it's accessible to that Python 3 interpreter, then you're going to have access to it. So that's going to be the thing that you're going to need to consider, is make sure that when you're installing dependencies that they are installed accessible to the interpreter that is being shown through JupyterHub.
Do you see any major differences or any differences at all between JupyterHub, the interface behavior, et cetera, and when you're using Jupyter on your own laptop?
No, as far as I can tell, it's identical. I mean, if the network is slow, then you're going to have some lag because all of the processing is happening on the server. But aside from that, it's pretty much identical to the way that I would use Jupyter Notebooks on my own computer. I haven't seen any differences in the way it actually functions. So, I mean, and actually right now, this is acting like I have this open at my home directory for the server. So this web browser is on this laptop right here. The hub is running on a server in New York City. So it's acting like this web browser is open on that server, with the directory that's open being the home directory. And so I can access it. I mean, none of this is Jupyter Notebooks, this is just my Anaconda installation, but I can navigate through it just the way I would if I had Jupyter Notebook open to this directory on the local computer. So it's pretty much exactly the same Jupyter Notebook that you would use locally, just spun up in this distributed manner. Pretty impressive, honestly.
Is part of your concept that they'll have this server would be up for the entire framework of the class, like this is going on for 2 or 3 weeks or over 3 lessons. This server would be up so people could work on these notebooks in the interim between classes.
Yes.
Is that the concept?
Yeah, and I don't know how much, I haven't actually put the class itself together yet, so I haven't figured out exactly how I'm going to structure that, but I wanted to set up the server, go through the experience of setting up the server before I built a class around it, because I wanted to make sure that I had a proof of concept. So now that I know that I can run the server effectively, the next step will be to figure out how I want to structure a class, what topics I want to present in what order, and part of that is going to be involving, how much is going to be online while we're actively working and how much will be homework type stuff, that sort of thing. But yes, the server could stay live for the duration of the class and for some period after if I wanted to do that, if I wanted to leave it available. Mm-hmm.
So if a user is accessing, they can see all the files under the home?
Right.
Is there
right.
any way we can limit the access?
Well, so the only reason that this is showing, the only reason I'm seeing the Anaconda folder is because I installed Anaconda in my home folder, and I logged in as me.
Okay.
So I logged in as that user. Any other user logging in is not going to see my home directory there.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's nice. Thank you.
Yeah.
Have you used the OAuth yet? Have you set it up yet on your?
I have set it up on the other one, yeah.
Okay.
It works pretty smoothly. It's,
And it just, I guess, generates new directories for each user?
Yeah. Yeah.
So, one more question. If I need to share my GPU cluster with somebody else, I can set up this way and they can run the Jupyter and they can access the
Yeah.
GPU?
Should work. Yeah.
Thank you.
In a class environment where they may all be processing something for 1 minute, would the Digital Ocean server sort of be crippled under that low
Yes.
environment?
Yes, if I had my students, so and this would be very relevant for something like data science, where there might be CPU intensive stuff. For my particular application where I'm just doing an intro to Python, it's unlikely that I'll have them do anything that's going to be very CPU intensive. But yes, that is a concern because they all would be running off the same CPU. Now again, JupyterHub does have stuff built in to be able to do load balancing among different servers, so you can do that. It's not as smooth as you would like it to be because it can't dynamically move people's instances around, but it can say, oh, I've got this many, I'm only allowed to have this many instances per server, so I've reached my cap here, so I'm going to spin this one up on a different server, and it can balance that way. So you can, if you anticipate what the peak needs are going to be, then you can make sure that people are spread out enough that, and you'll only have to install it once, and then you'll have to do the configuration to do load balancing, but you still don't have to install the JupyterHub on every single one individually. So they do have that functionality as well, but that would be a concern if you're going to do anything CPU intensive, to consider what your peak usage is going to be and consider that.
What is the DigitalOcean cost structure like?
So it's pretty inexpensive, and they do hourly pricing, so that's one of the reasons that I went with it for just fiddling around, is because I can spin something up, install, go through, do tests, and then when I'm done playing with it, just shut down the droplet, and I've paid like 2 cents to use it hourly, because their base rate instance is $5 a month, which is like 0.7 cents per hour. So for just experimenting with things, I love it because it costs me almost nothing to experiment with something as long as I shut it down when I'm done experimenting. And so, I mean, you could do the same thing on Linode or, a host of other places. But like I said, because of the hourly pricing, that's what I tend to use for experimental stuff. So.
Is there a similar project competing with JupyterHub for this concept to be the winner?
Not that I'm aware of. If there is, I'd be interested to hear about it because I'm curious about what kind of stuff is going on in the space. It's definitely an innovative thing, but I have not heard of anything that I would consider comparable for this type of application.
There's something a little bit different is, I think it's called Python Anywhere.
Yeah, I'm familiar with that.
Yeah.
It's a little bit more rigid, a little bit more locked down. One of the things about JupyterHub is that it's got the flexibility You can put it on any size server you want. You know, like I was just mentioning, I'm using the smallest DigitalOcean instance, which of course is limited CPU and all this sort of thing. But you can put JupyterHub on any size server you want as far as memory and CPU and all that. Whether it's DigitalOcean or your own box. I mean, you could do that on your own box, host it locally.
Yeah,
If you wanted to.
Python anywhere, someone else is hosting it, and it's
Yeah.
not the Jupyter Notebook either. It's
Right.
more of a console session.
Yeah, yeah.
So you want, you're using Zeppelin? Okay, so it's a Apache Foundation project that has the notebook concept, and you have Python notebooks in it as well as other things. So it's just like this a totally alternative ecosystem for doing notebooks, but I don't think they've done anything like a hub for Zeppelin. I don't know, I've heard of a Zeppelin hub.
Yeah,
Anything
yeah.
like that.
Yeah, I have used the Databrick, but the backend is a Spark cluster, and it's a similar concept here where you have a notebook environment.
Okay, yeah, Spark Cluster.
Right.
I know of that. I've never played with it, but yeah, that does seem like it would overlap some. And
Yeah, well,
What's
it
available,
will be
yeah.
a lot more useful if you have a need for a cluster.
Right,
But
yeah.
the point is that they use the concept of the notebook, and you have the different environments where, and I used it on the PyData Carolinas here for the tutorial, and everybody were able to log in, create their account, and follow the tutorial without a problem, so.
excellent.
I actually think the Databricks front end is a Jupyter Notebook, and it just has it will handle Python and Scala and all
Yep.
of everything that goes to the Spark backend.
Yeah, they say it's not Jupyter, it's their own version of Jupyter, but yes.
I think it's Jupyter with their logo on it.
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing about open source is, you know, okay, we borrowed. How heavily did we borrow? Yeah. Anything else? Yeah.
So if there's a group of analysts in a company trying to collaborate, would this be a good solution for them to share code and share data behind the corporate firewall and not hosting it outside their own environment?
Possibly. I'm not sure there's enough bleed over between the different user accounts. One of the things about JupyterHub is that it focuses on insulating each person's stuff from other people, so I'm not sure it would have that collaborative aspect so much. It might not be the best application for that.
Potentially you could, if you're doing something, you could promote what you were doing through an administrator that would then, they would then copy that notebook to a route that everybody had access to.
Yeah, I mean, you could have a directory in your home directory that was shared, and then everybody's shared directories copy across. So you could set something up like that, where you could put something into the shared directory, and then there'd be something automated on the back end that would make sure that that copies over to everybody's shared directory, or is sim-linked more likely. So that would probably be one way to accomplish that, but
I think that
yeah.
a wiki might be a better sharing.
Yeah. This isn't the first thing I would reach for trying to collaborate.
What is?
Well, that depends on what exactly I'm trying to collaborate. You know, as Mark said, you know, if you're just trying to share code and that sort of thing, a wiki may very well be a good option because you can dump your stuff on there and share it. But if you're sharing something that's involving large files and that sort of thing, then a wiki may not be robust enough for that, depending on how you set it up. So, I mean, there's a lot of different ways to skin that particular cat. Collaboration is something that has had a lot of people focused on it, and there are numerous different options out there. So it really, I would start with what's the goal here, and then find an option that works for that particular collaboration goal.
Even GitHub.
Yeah.
It would be a collaboration to share code if everybody is putting code toward an end.
Yeah, I mean, you know, there's things like Basecamp and, you know, Dropbox, and I mean, you know, just depending on what kinds of stuff you're trying to collaborate, what kinds of goals you're trying to accomplish. There's all kinds of different things, yes.
So you mentioned GitHub, does it have an integration with GitHub?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, so it's not by default. You have to add that function in, but it's all built in. So JupyterHub Authentication, there we go. So let's see. So here's the information that JupyterHub has on their documentation about authentication. So let's see. So they tell you, it ships only with the PAM-based, which is the local user's permissions authentication management or something, or password authentication. I forget what PAM stands for, but this is the local user authentication that I was talking about.
Pluggable authentication. Pluggable authentication.
Thank you, pluggable authentication modules. There's always somebody in the room who knows it. All right, so that's the only thing that JupyterHub ships with, but you can use custom authenticator subclasses. And so if I go down here to OAuth, so you can see an example implementation of something using GitHub OAuth over here. If we click through that, we have on the JupyterHub GitHub an example of using this. So I mean, there's stuff that you have to plug into it to make it work, but it's already been done. So you don't have to reinvent the wheel. You can just plug this in. The OAuth, let's see, where is the thing that lists all of the things that it handles? Because it's a decent list of what you can just plug in. Let's see. Here we go. So the OAuth plugin that you can drop in does GitHub, Bitbucket, MediaWiki, CI Login, or Google OAuth. And that's just what you can drop in. It doesn't come with it by default, but you can drop it in just like an external library. So, yes.
Charlotte, this is a little off topic, because it's not a JupyterHub question, it's a Jupyter question.
Okay.
I don't really know how to put a Jupyter Notebook into, to put it into GitHub to version control that. Is there a file, is there a way that your students can say, okay, my notebook is finished, this assignment is done, I want to put it into a version control from the JupyterHub or from a Jupyter Notebook in general?
Yeah, so it can get a little bit clunkier. I've hit this before with using JupyterHub notebooks in class environments as a student, where if you are not careful to keep everything in sync, you can break things because Jupyter notebooks require different files to be in sync with each other. But with that said, as long as you are syncing an entire directory together and you're not trying to check out a single file from an older version, it works very seamlessly that you can manage this in GitHub.
So do you just use do you download to your local laptop and then push up into your repository?
Yep. So when you're doing local, you have to have Jupyter installed locally, obviously, and then you run it in the directory that you cloned, and it'll run the notebooks that you've got in that directory. And then as you make changes, it saves. You can upload that back up to your own fork of it, and keep track of your changes as you go through. So yes, it is very seamless as long as you don't try to do anything fancy and try to pull single files, because that can break it.
But that's through the command line interface.
Yeah, I mean, there's GitHub graphical interfaces that you can use the exact same way. I always use GitHub command line just because that's what I've always used with GitHub, but the GitHub GUIs do just as well. Anything else?
It would be interesting.
Yeah.
Follow on to that. If in Jupyter, in a notebook, say I'm putting together a notebook for my class, kind of administrative or maintenance or organizational kinds of commands like that
Mm-hmm.
could be in the notebook itself. So to say, you know, you're going to now clone this GitHub project and have the notebook do that.
Yeah, so.
You don't go to a terminal, you don't have to drop down the console, you just go all there and write the notebook and the.
So I mean,
You do that outside of the language that you're using.
well, so the JupyterHub actually does give you a terminal. If I can get,
Yeah,
there's my
but
cursor.
I think he was saying not using the terminal.
Well, maybe the instructions are going to have to be the block text.
Yeah.
Say, now open a terminal and do this.
Oh,
But it would be nice if
Yeah.
there's a block of code there that you could execute that's going to go out and do the clone for you.
Yeah, but so this is a terminal on the server that I've now opened from the JupyterHub in my browser.
I was just thinking,
So, yeah.
Are things available within the import OS and do things from Python through OS
Yeah,
to,
yeah,
it says this is part of your setup, to run this block, don't ask questions. Import magic stuff from teacher. Run this, and magic happens from the teacher.
Well, I did a little bit of that using Min Ragan Kelley's stuff that he put together that, I'm not going to pretend that I know fully how everything he put together works. I understand how to set it up and how to use it. I understand some of the configuration that I can do with it. I'm not going to pretend that I understand all of how JupyterHub works. I mean, if I go back to here, I can hand wave on this chart a bit, but I don't necessarily understand exactly what all these pieces do. I know what authentication is. I know that we have a database of users. I understand what that is. I understand that JupyterHub spawns these instances. There's a lot of magic in all of these pieces because these are not my specialty. That's fine. I don't have to understand what's going on under the covers as long as I understand how to use it. I understand what the risks are. I understand, I need SSL because this. I need to, protect things this way. I need to make sure I've got insulation this way. I'm going to use Docker containers for this reason, that sort of thing. Those are the things that I need to understand. So, yeah, the whole magic commands the teacher said to run, I can get behind that.
But it also sounds like, if you're thinking through this like a teacher designing a course, and you know that every user is going to generate a new home directory as they log in, you might put something in Scale that runs a script that builds the directories, clones the repos, does all that stuff, kind of the magic we're talking about, and then sets it up so that by the time the student gets to the notebooks or to the interface itself, all of the teacher's instructional material is in the right place for that student's account.
Yeah. So there's a lot of possibilities with JupyterHub in terms of setting up environments and what you can present to the students and that sort of thing. It is very much a project in progress. JupyterHub is still changing rapidly. Like I said, they're not even at version 1.0 yet because they're still in that process of trying to figure out exactly how everything's going to stabilize out. So I'm not going to claim that this is all going to be the same in 12 months because when you've got a project that's that early, these things may change. But I do think they're close enough to it. They've got an idea where they're going. They're pretty solid. I don't think it's going to change that dramatically. Obviously, I was willing to put in the effort to figuring out how to make it work at this stage for my purposes. But yeah, so it'll be interesting to see where JupyterHub lands when they get more stable, but it's still a very new project.
Probably a new question here, but
sure.
Can the Jupyter Notebook command inside there issue a shell command? Escape its confines to say do a git clone of a GitHub repository?
I don't think inside the notebook that you can. I mean, the hub gives you that terminal access, but I don't think that inside a notebook you can. I could be wrong, but you can?
Yeah.
Okay.
Percent bash
Uh-huh.
as the first line.
Okay.
And then everything after that will run some shell command.
I learned something. All right, anything else?